This is going to be one behemoth of a video. 4 units are coming out with this banner, 2 of those being 6 stars, meaning more skills to talk about. If you just want to know about 1 or 2 things, feel free to use the timestamps to skip around. But if you want to stay here for the whole thing, grab a drink, get comfortable, and let's begin. First of all, Chapter 8 is going to be the longest one yet, meaning it'll take a little while to get through, especially if you're reading the story. But the total of 51 Arknight Prime by the end of it makes it all worth it. Speaking of the story, I hope you have your Amiezi 2'd because you'll need that in order to progress past a certain point, as well as being able to unlock her guard form, which I'll be talking about in the near future. Since this is a pretty important release, we'll be getting some extra login bonuses, giving us a total of 1,100 extra sanity by the end of it, a pretty cute brand new furniture piece on the first day, plenty of mats that we always need, as well as 4 of the new materials that can now be farmed on this chapter. While we'll only be getting to Arknight Prime with this, we'll be getting some random every day for 15 days, 800 on the first, and randomly generated between 200, 300, 500, and 800 on the other days. If you have horrible luck and only get 200 every day, that's still 3,600 by the end of it, including the guaranteed 800. And if you have god tier luck and get that much every day, it's 12,000 by the end. Although, if you average it all out to 450 a random, that's a total of 7,100. So just cross your fingers and hope that RNG is on your side. On the 10th day, we get a free Ethan skin. I've recently discovered he actually has quite a few fans out there, so I'm sure they'll appreciate this. Plus, I really like his sprite with this skin anyways. Speaking of skins, Texas will be getting her second one with this event. While it doesn't have any special effects since it's a 15 cost, her sprite is really nice and I love how well the colors contrast. Plus, the splash art is just fantastic, as per usual. Texas fans out there are thriving right now. Doberman is also getting her own 15 cost skin, and once again, God, the splash art is so good. I can't spare to buy any of these new skins, but if I could, it'd be hers. I absolutely love the atmosphere, and the crest on her hat being in the shape of pointy dog ears, love that. The skin that does have special effects belongs to W. It's a much more casual looking skin than the other 2, but the art is just chef's kiss. I can't show it since my computer doesn't handle GIFs, but the icy special effects that come with it are top tier. So to all you W lovers out there, I hope you enjoy this skin despite its simplicity. Plus the little Inez and Hoderer cameo, God, I miss them. If you're willing to spend actual money on this game but have been contemplating when and why, here's your chance. There will be 3 new packages in the store offering quite a few things. So from lowest to highest price, if you remember the Duck Lord from KOB Funk I missed, he's back again, willing to give you some Arknight Prime and LMD. The second pack gives you 1 10 roll as well as the ability to choose a 6 star of your liking. If you want any one of these units, you can get them now without having to worry about gacha spooks. And last but not least, there's this big boy of a pack. You can pause if you want to read everything there is in it, but to put it shortly, it's a lot. Going back to in-game currency, there's going to be a simplistic yet super cute new furniture set, so if it interests you, it's there for purchase. Alright, that's all. Now let's talk about the actual operators.
Hajimemashite, Doctor! 新人オペレーターのジャッキーだよ。前はクルビアで補助警察をやってたんだ。これから仲良くやろうね。
Starting off with the girl who looks like she's ready to make her VTuber debut, Jackie is our newest brawler and I can't wait until her archives get translated to figure out why. That being said, a brawler's biggest selling point is their super high attack speed and her talent helps increase it. Depending on her promotion level and her potential, she'll be granted a certain amount of physical evasion. At E1, that can either be 15 or 18%, meaning that out of every 50 hits she'll successfully evade 7 or 9, while at E2 it's either 30 or 33. Raising the success numbers up to 15 and 16. When she does evade, she'll gain an extra little bit of attack speed, plus 6 at E1 and 12 at E2, bringing her attack interval down to 0.74 seconds and 0.69, basically 0.70 respectively. This increase lasts for 5 seconds and sadly doesn't stack if she manages to evade twice in a row, although I personally think it should, since at E1, while she'd normally fit in 6 attacks or a 6.4, if we're being exact, during a 5-second time frame, with her talent it's still only 6. Technically 6.7, which is obviously an increase, but it could be even 6.99999, which is still below 7, rendering the effect of her talent pretty much impossible to notice. At E2 it does increase it to 7, but the fact that you have to E2 a unit in order to notice their talent making a small difference isn't really a good thing. Although to be fair, the attack speed part of her talent feels more like a bonus, while the evasion is a true selling point of it. And all that being said, I have no complaints whatsoever about her first skill. After 3 attacks, the 4th one will deal 210% damage, which is 898 at E1 max. There's not really much to say about this. It's a pretty basic first skill, but also a pretty good one. The fact that she attacks so quickly makes this even better than it is on most other units, since this is happening pretty much every 3 seconds, increasing her average non-skill included DPS of 548 up to a solid 1571, which is great for a 4-star. Skill 2 is completely different from her own niche, making her actually stop attacking. She gains an additional 60% physical evasion, which does stack with her talent, although it's not as simple as it seems. I'm gonna go into a little bit of math here, so skip to this timestamp if you want to avoid all that. Trust me, I understand. Evasion in Arknights is multiplicative. While the math isn't 100% solid, it's easy to make a good estimate. To explain with much simpler numbers, we'll be using Helliger and Deep Color as an example. With a skill 2, he gains 75% evasion, and with Deep Color skill 2 at level 1, that gives him an extra 25% evasion. In total, that'd be 100%, right? Well, no, and while it's disappointing that he doesn't become an unkillable god, it's understandable since that'd be way too broken. The basic evasion formula would be 100 minus 100 times 1 minus x times 1 minus y, possibly adding more depending on how many evasion buffs you have going on. The x and y are replaced by the percentages, leaving you with the result of how likely it is they'll actually get hit. You then multiply those two to get an average, multiply that by 100 since we're working in decimals, then subtract that number from 100 to get the actual evasion percentage. So since it isn't a simple addition, at E1 max potential 5, she has a 67.2% chance of evading, and whenever it succeeds, she immediately counterattacks the enemy and deals 150% physical damage to them, that being 642. At M3, the evasion chance goes up to 70%, and with her upgraded talent, that's 79.9 in total. The damage she deals is increased to 160%, and at E250, that'd be 800. And now, the time span between each time she can do this is 50% of her attack interval instead of the 60% it was before, meaning that if she was constantly being attacked, she could hit them back every 0.39 seconds instead of 0.46. This skill has the potential to be pretty great if it wasn't for the fact that she's a single blocker. This certainly still has its use. I mean, you could even ignore her actual niche and use her as a taunt with this skill, but it would be much better if it increased her block count by 1 as well. Brawlers are kinda niche units in general, but Jackie does her DPS job well. If buffs were a thing in Arknights, I feel like slightly reworking her talent and giving her an extra block count on her second skill would drastically improve her. I understand not wanting a 4-star to outshine higher rarity units, but none of the other brawlers have similar skills to her second one. I guess for now you can bring a support Nyan and Deep Color along with her and meme them to all hell.
Watashi no code name wa Whisperain. 1階の放浪石です。もしよろしければ、私のことは同じ屋根の下で雨宿りをしているだけの旅人だと思ってお気になさらず。
Whisperain is the first large-range medic operator to come out on global servers ever since Ceylon, and I have to admit this, in my opinion, she's one of the prettiest units in the game. I really love that wispy, flowy aesthetic she has going on, and if she comes home with one of the free roles we'll get, even if I never level her up, I'll definitely be staring at her as my assistant for a little bit. In case you've forgotten or don't know, a long-range medic is, well, exactly that. Stat-wise, they tend to have a lower attack than normal medics while still being quite a bit higher than AoE ones. While healing allies on the tiles that are considered of a longer range, they'll only be healed for 70% of the medic's attack. On her stats I have both normal and ranged attack values, as well as highlighting which tiles are distant. With that being said, her talent seems somewhat niche at first, but is actually a really nice bonus once you think about it. Any unit within her range that has resist gets healed by 3 or 6% of her base attack for the time that they have the resist status. Not gonna go over the actual numbers here since those tie in with what she does with her skills, so speaking of that, skill 1, after 3 heals, the 4th one will recover the ally's HP by 120% of her attack, that being 447 for close units and 313 for distant ones, as well as healing an additional target and granting the 2 of them resist for 4 seconds. Considering the fact that this skill prioritizes allies that have stun, chill, or freeze, and resist reduces the duration of those by 50%. The allies healed by this will also be recovering an extra 11.19 HP for the duration of their status resistance, meaning that by the end they've recovered an extra 44.76 HP, totaling the heals to approximately 491 for close units and 357 for distant ones. Simply M1ing this skill can make quite a big difference even without leveling Whisperain beyond E2 level 1, notably because it increases the resist time to 5 seconds, and with her talent improvement, they'll be healed by 6% of her max attack, that being 22.38 or 111.9 after the 5 seconds. Plus, now this happens every 2 attacks. Skill 2 caught you questioning whether a 3 and 6% extra heal actually made any difference at all and decided to increase it. Now she'll give an ally 5% of her attack and extra HP at E1 and 10% at E2. Well, 5.1 and 10.2 to be exact. This skill doesn't increase her actual attack, but it does reduce her attack interval, which is really good for a medic, meaning she heals every 2.28 seconds instead of every 2.85. Each time she heals someone, they're granted resist for 3 seconds. So while being healed for a base of 373 or 261, they'll also be receiving an additional 19 HP for 3 seconds, being 57 in total. Sadly, M3ing it doesn't further increase her attack interval, but it does increase the effect of her talent and the amount of time allies will be granted resist. Since she's at E2, the talent's HP recovery would be 6% of her attack or 25.86 at level 50, but since her talent raises it to 200% of its effectiveness, it'll be 51.72 HP per second, and since your allies now have resist for 4 seconds, by the end of that, they'll have recovered an extra 206.88 HP, leading to a total heal of approximately 638 for closer units or 508 for distant ones. I gotta admit that before M3ing this skill, it sounds a little boring since it won't heal as much as the first skill, plus that one heals 2 targets, but the fact that it's an infinite duration skill is what really sells it, especially since most infinite skills that charge per second take a hefty amount of time to charge, while this one takes less than a full minute. During a 4-minute battle without any skills active, she could heal a total of 84 times, while with this second skill, taking its charging time into consideration, she could heal 104 times. But honestly, either or of her skills are viable. It mostly just depends on what you prefer, as well as the overall setup of your team. Speaking of which, if you have any other allies that grant resist, that's obviously a fantastic combination. Whisperain is a large improvement from the first long-range medic in the game, but I do understand that some people just don't like them in general because of their lower attack stats. Either way, if this jellyfish lady comes home to you, I hope you treat her well.
猿数の傭兵、マドロックだ。あなたがドクターか。何度もロドスに救われた身だ。今こそ、恩義に報いさせてもらう。
Mudrock is peak character design and you can't change my mind. I'm only partially joking, I genuinely really do like this design, especially her little sprites, and I'm super glad that she's not the limited unit from this banner since I won't be able to roll much and she might spook me in the future. Please do. Despite not being able to be healed by allies, since she's part of the same archetype as Vulcan, she has quite a bit of survivability, already being demonstrated with her first talent. She gains a shield after deployment and then another one every 9 seconds. They can stack, although only 2 layers at E0 and E1 and 3 at E2. These shields block 1 instance of damage, and each time it's broken, she recovers a certain amount of her HP. Before promotion, it's 15%, being 331 at level 50, 20% at E1, being 573 at max level, and while it's also 20% at E2, at level 50, it'd be 690. And just for fun, if she's completely maxed out, it'd be 785. Because of her second talent, she also takes reduced damage from Sarkaz enemies, 30% less to be exact, so that also adds on to the survivability aspect. But despite her unique archetype, she's still a defender, so her first skill is a pretty basic defender skill, increased defense by 60%. At E1 max, that brings her from 463 up to 740 for 40 seconds. While this is good, it doesn't really matter because, let's be real, if you're using Mudrock, it's not going to be for her first skill. Skill 2 is where things start to get interesting. First of all, it's a getting hit type of recovery skill, so if you happen to pull for Blumishine and got her, they'll be a great pair, since it'll allow Mudrock to also charge this skill by attacking. But fear not, even if you don't have her, it's perfectly fine because it only takes 5 hits to fully charge. And since she can block 3 enemies, that'll be happening pretty quickly. Next time she attacks, she deals 210% physical damage to all ground enemies in the 8 tiles surrounding her, that being 1442 at E1 max. There's a 30% chance they'll be stunned for 0.6 seconds after, and as well as that, she also recovers 5% of her max HP, which is 143. At M3, the HP recovery is increased to 6%, being 172 at just E2 level 1, but since you'll have her leveled up, at E250 it'd be 207. Her attack is now increased up to 270%, so she'll hit quite a few enemies with 2143 power, which is nothing to look past. While the chance to stun isn't increased, if it succeeds, the enemies will now be stunned for 1.2 seconds, double the amount of time from before. This is a pretty great skill since it has a little bit of everything. Some extra HP recovery outside of her talent, a possibility to stun enemies, a pretty large attack boost that hits lots of people, and a very consistent usage time since it only takes a few hits to charge. But that still isn't peak Mudrock. With skill 3, well, let's go through this slowly because there's a lot to take in. First and foremost, she basically inflicts slumber upon herself by becoming invulnerable but unable to take action for 10 seconds. During this time, all enemies in her range have 60% less movement speed, so I'm sure all your snipers and casters will be very happy about this. As soon as she wakes up again, any enemies that are still in her range are now stunned for 3.5 seconds, which is quite a while. For the 20 seconds left, her attack interval is reduced by 30%, so she attacks every 1.12 seconds instead of every 1.6. Her defense is increased by 50%, now being 810, and her attack is increased by 100%. So while its pure stat increase would make it be 1588, it could technically be at a max of 4764 if she's blocking 3 enemies, since she'll be attacking all of them. M3ing this doesn't change the first part of the skill, except for the fact that the enemy stun now lasts 5 seconds. Her defense is now increased by 80%, leading it to be 972, and her attack by 140%, now being 1905 or 5715 if counting the total damage that she could be dealing. The best part about this skill is that its charging time is shorter than its actual duration, being 25 at M3 or 29 at level 7, while the actual skill is 30 seconds. Even with a 10-second down period at the beginning of the skill, because of her decreased attack interval, the ratio of how many times she'll attack with and without the skill is nearly the same, being 17 to 18 at level 7 and 17 to 15 at M3, so there's pretty much zero wasted time if we're just looking at in terms of how many times she'll attack. Overall, Mudrock is incredibly solid. While she can't be healed by others, recovering 20% of her max HP every 9 seconds is pretty much much guaranteed unless there are no enemies around to attack her, but she can still be healed passively, so if you have an E2'd Angelina or even just a perfumer, bringing them along can help even more. I'd say her biggest downfall is her incredibly high cost, as of now being the most expensive unit in the game, although that is part of her archetype, so there's not much to really complain about. Plus, just look at her, man. I want to make her happy.
こんにちは。ドクター、エリートオペレーターのロスモンティスだよ。ケルシー先生の許可が出たから、私とチームの指揮権はドクターにあるよ。私の力を正しく使ってね、ドクター。それから、私は物忘れがひどいから、忘れてそうなことは教えてね。
Rosmontis is our limited operator for this banner and also happens to sort of be a new archetype. She has the same range as Ambrielle, does splash damage, and also has a much quicker attack time than most units who are even somewhat similar to her. Plus, her splash damage also has an aftershock that deals an additional 50% of her attack, so she's already sounding pretty great just by looking at her trait. Her first talent isn't too fantastical, ignoring 90 defense at E1 and 160 at E2. While for enemies that already have a lower defense, this can make a pretty huge difference. It's less notable with enemies that have high defense, although definitely not useless. Second talent is also pretty simple, increasing her attack by 8% when at E2, as well as the attack of a random caster operator. Not too much to say here, but it's appreciated. But while her talents may seem a little boring, her skills certainly make up for it. Skill 1s are almost always the simplest, and so is hers, but that doesn't mean it can't help her deal a hell of a lot more damage. Every 3 attacks, the 4th one deals an additional hit of arts damage, which is equal to 120% of her attack, aka 700. So basically, her attack and aftershock together are already dealing 876 damage by themselves, plus an extra 700 in arts, or now 1576 in total. Of course, this will vary from enemy to enemy, since some with low defense have high resistance and vice versa, but it's still a pretty big boost to be happening quite often. Although I have to admit that while it is good, it is simple, so her second skill makes up for that. At the very beginning of it, there is a small demerit. Her attack interval is increased by 50%, leading it to be 3.15 seconds. But other than that, it increases the splash area of her attacks, as well as increasing the actual attack by 30%, leading it to be 759 at E1 max, and her aftershock to be 379. What makes a big difference in this skill is the fact that she now deals an extra 2 aftershocks, both also dealing the same amount of damage as her original aftershock, leading to 1138 total attack just in aftershocks and 1197 including her original attack. Not to mention that both her attacks and aftershocks have a 20% chance to stun for 1.1 seconds, so that's 4 20% chances in total. At M3, the only real differences are an attack increase of 55% instead of 30% and a slightly longer stun time of 1.5 seconds. But just so we can get over it, at E250 and taking her talent into consideration, her attack goes all the way up to 1072, and the aftershocks up to 536 or 1608 with all 3 of them together, leading the grand total of damage the skill does to be 2680. It's important to note that while this skill gives her a pretty lengthy attack time, it also lasts for quite a bit, 36 seconds at level 7 and 40 at M3, allowing her to attack 11 and 15 times respectively. Skill 3 starts off by doing the exact opposite and decreasing her attack interval by 50%, bringing it down to 1.05 seconds, which is nearly the same as a DPS sniper. Yes, I'm aware that that's her only tag, but they're an archetype of their own and she's also an archetype of her own. This skill also has a sort of demerit, making her incapable of attacking enemies who aren't blocked, but she has her own resolution to this by deploying 2 tactical gears on melee tiles within her range, which I'm pretty sure block 2 enemies each. When they're deployed, they stun all nearby enemies for 2.5 seconds and reduce the blocked enemies' defense by 160, so they have 320 less defense while counting in her talent. Her attack is increased by 40%, being 968, and making her aftershock be 484. With this skill, she can also attack 2 targets simultaneously, which is obviously pretty great. M3, it increases the stun to 3 seconds and her attack buff to 75%, raising her attack to 1211 and her aftershock to 605. While a higher attack boost is always appreciated and usually the biggest selling point of M3's skill, excluding the cases where it grants some sort of extra effect, I'd say the best part of this one is the reduced SP cost and slightly increased skill duration. While at skill level 7, it takes 74 seconds to charge and lasts 27 seconds, at M3 it takes 60 seconds to charge and lasts 30 seconds, bringing its activation ratio from nearly 3-to-1 down to a perfect 2-to-1, which is really good for a skill that does as much as this one. Rosmontis is a super interesting unit and looks like she'll be really fun to play around with. I'm super curious to see if we get more units of her archetype in the future, and if so, what they'll have to offer. That's it for this one. Oh boy, this was by far the longest video to script, and while I haven't edited it yet, I'm currently just voicing it, obviously. I'm pretty sure it'll also be my longest video in general. I'd like to apologize if my voice was more nasal than usual or if it changed during this video. As of the time that I'm recording this, I'm sick and my sinuses are driving me absolutely insane, so I can't really control that. I'm super excited for everything this event is going to bring us, and I'm just super excited to read through Chapter 8 in general. On my Blemish Shine video, I gave all of you my luck since I wasn't rolling on that banner and it seemed to work, so I'll be doing the same for this banner since I'll only be rolling with the free rolls we get and not with any of my actual random. I know how much people want some of these units, so I'm wishing you the absolute best of luck getting them, especially since I'm sure some of you are gonna start using your earnings more sparingly after seeing what the second anniversary is gonna bring to us. As a side note, my kind of hiatus but not really is officially over, so expect weekly uploads to finally be back, as well as me being more active in general. That being said, I have created a Patreon. I have no idea how it works, so please bear with me while I figure it out. Not gonna go on too much about it as you can read more about it there, but my only source of income is YouTube, and I haven't even made enough money to actually extract it yet. So if you're interested in supporting me and have the means to, I'll link it in the description. I'm not gonna go on any longer than that since this video is already way too long, so sorry for that, but thank you for watching. If you're new and enjoyed the vibes, feel free to stick around. That's all I have to say, and I'll see you another day.